Dear class, Mike here. Welcome to this week's video, A Pragmatic Toolkit for Critical Thinking. I've mentioned pragmatism a few times during the course. As a philosophy, pragmatism takes the view that we always begin our investigations in the messy experience of everyday life. And pragmatism has a method that it follows to try to solve problems and improve the world. It sees critical thinking skills as skills that anyone can learn with a proper education that begins early and continues throughout their lives as times change. New times and new problems require new tools. But really, these are tools much like a hammer, wrench, or screwdriver. You pick the right tool in the right situation. And the more you use the tool, the better you get at using the tool, obviously. My uncle had a roofing business, oddly enough called Brady Roofing, in the area north of Boston. And sometimes when I was younger, I would do a few houses with his crew in the summer to make some extra money. I could hammer a roofing nail pretty well, but my uncle and his team could hammer those nails much, much faster and rarely bent a nail or missed a spot. Critical thinking is a tool in exactly the same way. You have to learn to use the tools at a basic level, and then you must, and I can't stress this enough, you must practice the skills. So, today we'll be looking at 3 different tools. The first is the scout mindset. The second, super forecasting. And we will finish with Bayes' theorem, with no math. There are many other great tools we will not cover, like systems thinking, one of my current favorites, and old-fashioned formal logic. But these tools are much harder to explain in a short video. If you're interested, let me know and I will share some of my favorite resources for these other tools. The Scout Mindset is a simple yet powerful tool put forward by one of my favorite thinkers and educators in rationality, Julia Galef. She has an amazing and very long-running podcast called Rationally Speaking, and she covers ideas in rationality and critical thinking, but also constantly tries to apply these thinking skills to real-world problems. Just this year, she wrote a wonderful book that synthesizes some of her ideas called The Scout Mindset. And that is what I'll be summarizing here as our first tool. She begins with a comparison between what she calls the soldier mindset and the scout mindset. A soldier is not interested in truth. They're interested only in defending their deeply held position. A soldier is not looking for new evidence that might weaken their position or prove themselves wrong. And for a soldier, being wrong is simply and utterly a defeat. Unfortunately, we do not need to go far to see this kind of behavior. I've seen versions of it in my classes many times, but you could also see it for yourself. Just go on Twitter or Reddit and watch when someone critiques a popular celebrity or rich person like Elon Musk, for example. Seemingly like magic, hundreds of soldiers will pop up in the feed and begin their defense of Musk. Now keep in mind, these people are not Musk himself. They don't work for Musk, and as far as I can tell, they have no connection with Musk beyond mere idol worship. But they will fight, troll, and generally make jerks of themselves to defend Elon Musk. And this soldier mindset is all too common in politics, business, religion, sports, and everyday life. Now sometimes it's just a mere distraction with no real-world importance. I've personally seen fans of the New York Yankees and Boston Red Sox engage in this soldier mindset more than once. After you practice looking for the soldier mindset, it becomes quite easy to spot, but it is not always something unimportant like sports rivalries or Twitter trolls. Just watch an interview of any hardcore follower of Donald Trump who stormed the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, and you will see the same type of defensive, aggressive soldier mindset as they argue their case to justify their actions. Maybe even think of some of the people you know. Chances are that you know a person, hopefully not you, who just digs into their position and argues it as if it was life or death, and seemingly would rather die than admit they were wrong. That is a soldier mindset. Now instead, Julia Galef is suggesting you think like a scout. A scout is not trying to defend a position at all costs. A scout is trying to find out the truth about their world and the environment. So, Just imagine you were the scout exploring an area and your job is to bring back the most accurate information you can. If you're walking pleasantly along an open prairie and all of a sudden there's a deep, fast river blocking your path, you do not just pretend it's not there. Even if the path of the river is extremely inconvenient and right in your way. Now, of course, it would be nice to have a simple, straightforward path with no rivers in the way, but there is a river in the way. And it is your job to make an accurate map of the actual area, and not a map as you wish it happened to be. So for the scout mindset, reasoning is a lot like map making. That's the first tool. And all the other parts of this tool follow from the first idea. You do not try to force the world to fit what you hoped it would be or want it to be. Rather, you match yourself to reality as you find it. This does not mean you cannot build a bridge over the river if you need a bridge, but there is a river. And if you can find out that you were wrong about the path of the river or its depth, that is not a failure. It's only an opportunity for a better map. The only real failure is the failure to honestly admit error and fix the map. Now, this might seem like a simple tool, and really it kind of is. But start watching the world around you and see if you can pick out people with the soldier mindset, and then compare them with those people who have a scout mindset. Once you start looking, it becomes very obvious very quickly. And after you do this, it'll then be time for you to try the tool out for yourself. Predicting what will happen in the near future is very hard to do. From outside Wall Street or the US White House, it might seem like the world is full of experts in business and government that know everything and can predict what will happen accurately. But as years of evidence suggests, this is simply not true. Experts get stuff wrong all the time, though they don't often admit it. Over the past 30 years, there were so many large-scale mistakes that US spy agencies and the US government wondered how this could be fixed, or at least improved. So the United States government has a research program called IARPA that is based on deeper research into ways to improve its ability to collect intelligence for the CIA, NSA, DIA, and other government agencies with inscrutable initials. The important part for our lesson today is that they ran a long, multiple-year experiment to compare their top intelligence analysts against regular people with an interest in world events. It was called the Good Judgment Project. And it turns out that a certain subset of regular people, like retired pharmacists, Scottish teens, chemistry graduate students, and fiction authors, are much better at predicting complicated world issues than the actual professionals from the US intelligence agencies. Some of the studies suggest that they were as much as 30% better than the professionals. Now, that's a fun and interesting fact, but not super helpful for us. But what is helpful is that they have started to figure out how these people go from regular person to super forecaster. And like with the scout mindset, the skills they use are not all that difficult to understand. Rather, it seems that they tend to always follow about 10 different steps. So I've picked out 5 of them to look at today. The first step that most super forecasters take is to break a difficult question down into smaller parts that are easier to work on. So, in a practice Fermi question, as they're often called, like how many piano tuners work in the Chicago area, they will break down this huge question into a bunch of smaller questions, like what is the population of Chicago? How many households even have a piano? How often do pianos need to be tuned, etc. The second step the super forecasters will take is they will look at the outside view of a problem before thinking about the inside view. Instead of asking a coworker, how long do they think a project will take? That's the inside view. They will instead ask themselves or research, how long do projects like this around the world generally take? Because it turns out that insider information is notoriously inaccurate. Thirdly, they will always look to get feedback on their guesses from other people before, and this is the key, before anchoring or coming to their own final conclusions. This, they say, leaves some space to modify or throw out their own view if needed. And in all of their guesses, they'll try to assign a probability to the guess. They'll not say something simple like, I think the Red Sox are going to win the World Series. Instead, they will say they're 25% sure the Red Sox are going to win the World Series. And then they keep a record of this guess to compare with the result and to also compare for next year and the year after. Finally, they do what I would call an after-action report. Once they know the actual amount of piano tuners, or whether the Red Sox won or not, they go back and look where they were close, where they were right, or where they went wrong. And they keep track of this as well, so that if necessary, they can modify their guesses for the next time they'll use the same method. Now, you and I are unlikely to become super forecasters, but the evidence does show that regular people can learn these tools and get better at prediction as well. Our final tool is quite old now, but with its recent use in machine learning and artificial intelligence, it has grown quite important and influential. It was created by a mathematician named Thomas Bayes in the mid-1700s. At its core, it is simply a method to assign confidence, or lack of confidence, to some idea, event, or hypothesis, and then update this confidence based on some new evidence. You see a version of this every day when your weather app tells you that there is a 15% chance of rain, or that you can expect certain temperature range next Tuesday. And as the new evidence of climate change gets worse in the US, the National Weather Service has taken the new hotter weather and then combined it with older data and updated to a new normal range of temperatures, etc. Now, there are all kinds of complex philosophical, mathematical, and language use issues over where priors come from, the difference between likelihood and probability, and other geeky stuff. And there's even a fun and often quite vicious fight over frequentist versus Bayesian versions of probability. But none of that matters to us. Because if you just drop the math, Bayes' underlying idea is a very useful tool. In fact, I find it to be one of the most useful of all of these tools. So, here's how it works. Whenever something comes up that makes you pause, a chat with a neighbor, an unusual political event, a new disease, a surprising sports result, a job offer or job rejection, really just any occurrence in your life that gives you some pause for questioning. Now, why did my friend get the job or not get the job? Why did no one expect and prepare for this new disease? How did a low-ranked team beat a high-ranked team? Whatever it might be. You then set up in your head just a little mini experiment, and you say to yourself, what is my prior for this question, problem, or event? Now, a prior is just a fine-tuned guess based on your experience, and it's one that you're already walking around with right now. The trick is, when you ask yourself about the prior, you make it explicit, and you examine it in a clear way. And just making it explicit makes you really think about it in a clear way. So, how often does a low-ranked team win? Well, rarely. How often does your neighbor have a weird and implausible story? Well, pretty commonly, in my experience at least. So you start practicing thinking more clearly about the priors you're using all the time. You don't necessarily need to put a number on them like 25% or 75%. You can just say very likely, commonly, or very unlikely. And the key is to assign something to your prior and then be prepared to compare it to new evidence as it comes in. Now, to strengthen this examination of the prior, the next step is to ask yourself a question on purpose to test this confidence or lack of confidence. It goes something like this. Knowing what my prior is and my guess about the event, what would I think if I'm wrong? How surprised would I be? Very surprised? A little surprised? Not surprised at all? And this step helps you at the time think more clearly about the priors you're walking around with already. How surprised am I that my friend did not get the job based on what I know about them, the prior? And if they had gotten the job, how surprised would I be then? And so the final and most important step is that you need to be willing to change your priors, or update them, as it's called, if new evidence shows that you were wrong or more right than you were expected. If you thought your friend was just the greatest, but they failed time after time getting the job, you might just need to update. Maybe they're not the greatest. And if it turns out that your neighbor's wild and implausible stories are actually true, then you need to listen to their next story with an updated view of your neighbor. Now, like all the tools we've looked at, this tool is really quite simple. Closely examine the confidence you have in your judgment and then update if the evidence says you should. But it's surprisingly hard to integrate this into our lives. None of us wants to be second-guessing ourselves all the time, and even few of us want to admit we're wrong about stuff. But it is just this focus on our human weakness that makes this tool so very powerful, and you can literally get better at thinking and better at evaluating the future if you practice this a little each day. As usual, I give you 5 things to take away from today's video. A pragmatic philosophy is based on adaptation, experimentation, and a willingness to change over time. So, we should pick the tools best to accomplish our goals. And critical thinking, like anything else, has a set of specialized tools that we will use to solve life's problems. But it is not enough to learn the name of a tool and mess around with it a couple of times in a class. To really improve our thinking, we have to practice many times with these tools until they become almost second nature. Now, the first tool we looked at was the scout mindset. It asks us to imagine that reasoning is something like map making done by a scout while they're out exploring a new land. Instead of being a stubborn soldier, a good scout is open-minded and is constantly updating their map. Learning something unexpected or disconcerting is not a bad thing. Rather, new information and every error is an opportunity to improve our map and make it more accurate. The second tool comes from a set of people called super forecasters, and they can teach us some important lessons about prediction and evidence. By breaking down complex problems, assigning probabilities, and doing a rigorous after-action report, we can learn some of the methods that make these people the best thinkers on the planet. And with the Bayes theorem, we saw a formal method that could be turned to everyday use. There are 2 main points. First is that we need to spend a lot of time assigning a confidence level to our everyday priors about our experience. And the second and much harder step is that we need to constantly update this confidence, up or down, when evidence clashes with our prior. Now, most people have a tendency to dig in when they're wrong, but a good thinker instead needs to honestly update. And finally, I can't stress enough that these tools are all but useless if you do not practice. Learning the names and watching a short video will not get you very far. So we all need to practice, and then practice some more.